I really need to get this off my chest, because what is happening at my job is making me feel like I am going crazy. I keep going over it again and again in my head, and I am starting to wonder if I am losing my mind or if everyone else is just pretending not to see what I see. My name is Chelsea. I am 24 years old. I have been dealing with this situation for almost a full year now, and instead of getting better with time, it seems to get worse with every week that passes. About 12 months ago, our company hired a new guy. I will call him Dan. On paper, he looked completely normal. He is 27, has experience, seems professional enough. But from the very first day he walked into the office, something felt off. Not in a dramatic or obvious way at first, but there was this strangeness in the way he behaved, especially around the women. The first few weeks after he started, everyone did what people usually do when a new person joins the team. We tried to be kind and welcoming. Me and the other women made a point to include him, so he would not feel awkward or left out. There is Megan, who sits 2 desks away from me, and Sarah, who works in the cubicle right behind mine. The 3 of us get along well, and we both agreed we should help Dan feel comfortable. We invited him into casual conversations. We asked basic questions about how he was settling in. We asked where he had worked before, how he liked the office so far, whether he was from the area or had moved for the job. We also tried to be friendly in a normal way. Things like asking if he had any weekend plans, if he had found any good lunch places nearby, if he watched any shows we watched. Simple, harmless, normal workplace small talk. But his responses to us were always short and cold. If I asked how his weekend was, he would say something like it was fine and then instantly turn back to his computer. If Megan asked whether he wanted to join us for lunch, he would say he was busy and then swivel away in his chair. Sarah might say something friendly in the hallway, and he would answer with one word and keep walking. At first we tried to be charitable. We told ourselves he might just be shy. Maybe he was nervous about the new role or still adjusting to the environment. Maybe he needed time. I did not want to judge him too quickly. Some people do not open up right away. But that idea did not last very long, because before long we noticed that his behavior was not the same with everyone. The way he acted around the men in the office was completely different from how he acted with us. Whenever he spoke to male coworkers, he seemed almost like a different person. He would chat with them openly, laugh at jokes, and join in whatever conversation was going on. I would see him standing by Jake's desk, talking about sports for 20 minutes. I would see him leaning on Marcus's cubicle and discussing some movie or game. He would smile, laugh, make comments, ask questions, share opinions. It became very clear that he was capable of being friendly and normal. He just was not choosing to be that way with us. The moment that really hit me hard came a few weeks after he started. Our little group of women has a routine where we go to a small restaurant down the street for lunch a couple of times a week. It is simple food, but we like it. We talk about work, life, silly things that happen, whatever. It is one of the parts of the day that I look forward to. One day, I decided to invite Dan. I walked over to his desk and said that we were heading to lunch and asked if he would like to join us. Without even raising his eyes to look at me, he said something like thanks, but I have other plans. His voice was flat and distant. Then he kept typing, as if the conversation had already ended. Later that same day, I saw him in the break area, laughing with Jake and Marcus from accounting. They were talking about going out to lunch the next day, trying out a burger place. Dan was relaxed, smiling, clearly happy to be invited. He looked nothing like the person who had brushed me off earlier without basic eye contact. That was the first time I felt like this was not just about him being shy. It felt personal. And between you and me, that bothered me more than I expected. I usually get along with people pretty well. I am not used to someone acting like I am invisible. I talked with Megan and Sarah about it, and they told me they had noticed the same pattern. Megan said she had tried to chat about a show she watched, and Dan had replied with a short answer, and then turned away. Sarah said she had tried many times to start small conversations, and he would either give a yes or no answer or walk away at the first chance. The 3 of us started comparing notes. The more we talked, the more obvious it became. With us, he did the bare minimum. Good morning, good evening, quick work answers, and nothing else. With the men, he was friendly, engaged, and relaxed. He joined the guys when they talked about sports, games, random news. He laughed at their jokes. He joined in when they talked about things not related to work at all. He even joined their fantasy football group. He seemed comfortable and at ease in all those male interactions. But when it came to us, there was nothing like that. We were on the outside of whatever social world he had at work. Even the basic greetings felt stiff. When he said good morning or have a good evening to us, it sounded forced, like he was reading from a script because he knew he had to, not because he wanted to. There was no warmth in his tone. It felt like he was checking a box. For a while, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I told myself there might be reasons. Maybe he was socially awkward around women. Maybe he had had a bad experience in the past. Maybe he was just one of those people who keeps to themselves. I pushed these justifications in my mind, because I did not want to believe that he was simply choosing to treat us differently. But the longer I watched him, the more it looked exactly like a choice. He knew how to talk to people. He knew how to be friendly. He just reserved that version of himself for the men and switched to a cold, distant one for the women. Sarah was the first one to say out loud what I had been thinking. She said that his behavior was creating an uneasy mood in the office. She said it made the women feel like we did not belong, like we were not welcome in the same way the men were. She said it made her feel like she had to be extra careful whenever he was around, which is not how you should feel about a coworker. That really struck me, because I felt the same thing. Why should we be the ones walking on eggshells when we have done nothing wrong, and when he has already proven he can act normally? As time went on, my frustration started to grow. Every time he shut down a conversation with me or ignored a friendly comment, it stung a little more. I started to dread seeing him at his desk, because I knew that if I said anything at all, I would be met with that cold tone. Eventually, I decided I needed to really understand what was going on. His behavior was affecting how I felt about my job. I did not want to spend every day trying to avoid a coworker. I wanted answers, or at least clarity. So I began paying closer attention to his patterns in detail. I am not usually the kind of person who studies someone in this way, but this situation felt different. It felt like something bigger than just a personality clash. Each morning, I watched how he entered the office. He would walk in, say a generic good morning to the room, and then head straight for the male coworkers. He would stop at Jake's desk and ask about his weekend. He would talk to Marcus about a television show they both watched. He would stand next to our supervisor's desk and talk about something random for 10 or 15 minutes. But if I, Megan, or Sarah tried to join in those conversations, he would immediately shift. He would stand straighter. His tone would become formal, and his answers would shrink. It was exactly like someone flipping a switch from social mode to strict business mode. I began keeping track of specific moments. One that really got to me involved car trouble. One morning, Megan mentioned that her car was acting up and she was worried about getting stranded on the way home. Dan was standing right there. He heard her. He did not say a single word. No comment, no sympathy, no offer for advice. It was like he had not heard her at all. Later that day, Marcus mentioned that his car was making a grinding sound. Dan jumped into that conversation, asking what kind of noise it was, how long it had been happening, giving him tips about mechanics. He even offered to look at the car himself if Marcus wanted. They spent about 20 minutes discussing the issue. All that time and effort for Marcus, but nothing at all for Megan when she had the same problem. The more I watched, the more examples like that I found. He would eat lunch alone some days, but other days he would go out with the guys when they invited him. Sarah continued to invite him to join our lunch group, and every single time he had some reason he could not come. Yet somehow, those reasons never got in the way of him grabbing coffee with the men or joining them for drinks after work. It was hard not to take it personally. It hurt to see him act human and warm with male coworkers and then act like a silent robot around us. It felt like he did not think we were worth knowing. Another thing that really bothered me was the difference in his personality. With the men, he seemed like a normal person. He laughed. He told stories about his life. He complained about his apartment or traffic. He made jokes and seemed relaxed. With us, he became stiff. He would say yes ma'am or no ma'am in this overly formal tone. He would answer only what we directly asked and then stop talking. It made every interaction feel heavy and awkward, like we were bothering him for existing. Megan noticed that he never seemed curious about our lives. He did not ask about our families, our hobbies, or our weekends. He never followed up when we mentioned something personal. In contrast, he knew lots of little things about the men. He knew who had kids, who liked what sport, who had a dog, who was dating someone new. It was obvious that he cared about them as individuals but did not care to know us in the same way. There was a team meeting that really pushed everything over the edge for me. Our manager had asked each of us to share something interesting about ourselves, just to build some team spirit. One by one, people shared. When the men talked, Dan reacted. He asked follow-up questions, made comments like, "Oh, that is cool," or related their stories to things he had done. He laughed and seemed engaged. When it was my turn, I talked about a hiking trip I had done over the weekend. I explained how long the trail was and how proud I felt after finishing it. Dan looked at me, nodded once politely, and said nothing. No questions, no comments. Then Sarah talked about her photography. She said she loves taking pictures and sometimes does small shoots for people she knows. Again, Dan nodded and stayed quiet. Megan shared that she volunteers at a shelter in her free time. Same reaction from him. A polite nod and silence. After that meeting, the three of us went for coffee. Instead of feeling like a team, we felt like we had a wall in our own department that we could not cross. We all said the same thing in different words. His behavior was not just strange anymore. It was creating a hostile atmosphere. We felt like second-class people in the same office. Sarah shared that she had never experienced something like this in another job. Megan admitted she was starting to feel anxious about going into work every day because she knew she would have to be around him and deal with that cold behavior. I realized that what made me the angriest was the unfairness. We tried to be kind and supportive and build a good environment. He gave us nothing but distance. At that point, it started to feel like discrimination. It was not just that he preferred quiet. It was that he was clearly choosing to give one level of basic human warmth to the men and another much lower level to the women. I reached a moment where I felt like I could not just keep taking it silently. I wanted to understand his mindset. I wanted to know why he was like this at work when he obviously was not like this with everyone. That is when I decided to look at his social media. I know that might sound like a lot, but I felt like I had a right to understand the person who was making my day-to-day life so uncomfortable. So I looked him up on social platforms. What I found made things feel worse. His photos showed a normal social person. He went to parties. He went out to eat. He took pictures with groups of friends that included both men and women. He smiled and looked relaxed. He made jokes with his friends in the comments. There was no sign that he avoided women in other parts of his life. This told me that his behavior at work was not about some deep fear of women in general. It was about how he decided to act in that office. He clearly knew how to have casual, friendly relationships with women outside of work. So his cold, distant behavior toward us felt almost like a choice or a policy. After that, I started watching even more closely. I timed my breaks to see how he behaved in different settings. I saw him sit with the guys and talk easily. I saw him get up and walk away when one of us sat at the same table. I watched him spend almost an hour helping Jake fix a computer issue, laughing and joking the whole time. Then I saw him answer Sarah's project question with 2 quick sentences and walk off. The pattern was impossible to ignore. He was consistently warm with men and consistently distant with women. At that point, I began writing things down in more detail. It felt strange, but I thought if I ever needed to explain what was happening, I would need examples. I listed dates, times, and situations. I wrote that he joined group conversations but only directed his questions and responses toward the men. I wrote about moments when he offered to help male coworkers with tasks while ignoring similar needs from women. I wrote about him laughing at jokes from men but staying silent when women tried to be lighthearted. When I shared this with Megan and Sarah, they agreed the pattern was clear. They added their own examples. We also found out through conversations that Dan was in a group chat with several male coworkers where they talked about sports and planned after-work activities. None of the women had been invited to any similar group. We began to feel like there were 2 different workplaces existing in the same office space. One where the men had access to friendship, support, and casual connection with Dan, and one where the women received only the cold, professional version of him. What frustrated me the most was how few people seemed to care. The male coworkers were happy because he treated them well. Our supervisor seemed to view him as a solid employee who kept his head down. No one else seemed to notice that for a group of us, he was a constant source of discomfort. Sarah was the one who finally said we should consider going to HR. She said that when someone treats coworkers differently based on gender, that can be a form of discrimination, especially if it affects the work environment for those people. I was nervous, but I felt like she was right. We had been patient for months. We had tried to make excuses for him. Nothing had changed. Something happened soon after that made the decision easier. Jake and Marcus were planning a lunch to celebrate finishing a big project. They invited everyone in the department. When they asked Dan, he said yes quickly and sounded genuinely excited. He even said he had wanted to try that restaurant for a while. Then, as they were discussing the time, Sarah mentioned that she might have to move a meeting around to join. Right after that, Dan changed his mind and said he could not go after all because of other things he needed to do. It felt too sudden and too convenient. It felt like hearing that she would be there pushed him to back out. That same week, he agreed to go out for drinks with the men after work. At the same time, when Megan mentioned that a few of us were thinking of checking out a new happy hour place and that he could come if he wanted, he replied with the same distant line about having plans, again without looking at her. I could not keep accepting that as normal. It felt blatant. It felt insulting. It felt like he was making sure he did not have to be in any friendly setting with us. So I made a decision. I scheduled a meeting with HR. I told Megan and Sarah and asked them to join me. I spent the night before gathering all the notes I had made, organizing them as best I could. I wrote out how his behavior made us feel and how it affected our sense of being part of the team. I also noted that he clearly could be friendly with women outside of work, which showed this was not some general social issue. When we met with the HR representative, who I will call Lisa, she listened carefully as we told our story. I explained the pattern, the difference in his behavior toward men and women, the way we felt excluded, the way he made the office feel divided. Megan and Sarah each described their experiences, too. Lisa asked a lot of questions. She wanted specific examples, and we gave them. She asked about how long this had been going on, how often it happened, whether we had ever talked directly to Dan about it. She looked at the notes I had prepared. She said that treating male and female coworkers differently in a consistent way could be considered discrimination, and that the company took that seriously. She told us they would open a formal investigation. She said they would talk to other coworkers, review what we had shared, and speak with Dan as well. She said that if they found that our concerns were valid, they would require behavior changes, and there could be consequences for him. Hearing that made me feel seen for the first time in months. I felt like we had finally done something real instead of just complaining in private. Megan and Sarah said they felt relieved too. We all felt like we had done the right thing by speaking up. I will admit, I was curious about how Dan would handle being confronted by HR. Part of me thought he might realize how serious it looked and apologize. Another part of me thought he might get defensive and reveal even more clearly how biased he was. Either way, I thought the truth was on our side. A little while later, HR called me back in for a follow-up meeting. I walked in expecting to hear about what they had decided to do about his behavior. Instead, I walked into a conversation that turned everything upside down. Lisa began by saying they had completed the investigation and spoken to Dan. Then she started explaining his side. She said that Dan told them that at a previous job, he had been friendly and casual with some female coworkers, just like he was with the men. Eventually, one of those women had reported him, saying his behavior made her uncomfortable and that she thought he was flirting or crossing a line. He said the accusation had been false, but the process had been long and stressful. He said it almost ruined his career and reputation, even though nothing inappropriate had happened. Because of that, he had decided that in future workplaces, he would keep his interactions with female coworkers strictly professional. He called it a professional-only approach. He said he did it to protect himself from any misunderstandings or accusations. He said he did not trust that casual friendliness with women at work would be safe for him. I sat there stunned. Lisa talked about his explanation in a calm tone, as if it made everything understandable. I felt like what I had experienced as discrimination was now being reframed as self-protection. I tried to respond. I said that even if he had been through something traumatic before, his choice was still having a real effect on us. I said that his behavior made us feel like we were not equal coworkers. I said that he was treating all women as potential problems, instead of judging us as individuals. But Lisa seemed more focused on whether he had the right to set those boundaries. She said that he was allowed to keep his relationships professional, as long as he did not refuse to work with anyone or treat them unfairly in terms of job tasks. Then she told me something that hurt even more. During the investigation, several male coworkers had spoken in support of Dan. They said they knew about his past experience because he had shared it with them. They said they understood why he was reserved with women. They said they did not see anything wrong with him being more relaxed with men, since he saw them as less risky. Even our supervisor had backed him up. That made me feel betrayed. These were people I had thought of as friendly coworkers. I thought they would at least understand why we felt the way we did. Instead, they had lined up on his side and painted his behavior as reasonable. Then Lisa shared something I truly did not expect. She said that during the investigation, some coworkers had raised concerns about how me, Megan, and Sarah had been watching Dan and talking about him. People had noticed that we seemed to time our breaks around his. They had heard us discussing him often. Some said it made them uncomfortable to see us paying so much attention to one person. Lisa said that from the company's perspective, closely monitoring a coworker, documenting their behavior, and talking about them over and over could be seen as harassment. She said that while our feelings were understandable, our response had gone too far. She said that the way we handled it had created tension in the office. In the end, she told me that HR had decided not to take any action against Dan. They believed he was within his rights to keep his interactions with female coworkers strictly professional, as long as he was not rude in a direct, obvious way. But she said that the company was concerned about how we had handled things. She said that me, Megan, and Sarah would be required to attend training sessions about boundaries and appropriate workplace behavior. She also said that they would put a note in our records and watch to make sure there were no further issues. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I had been hit by a wave. I had gone in thinking we were helping make the workplace fairer and come out labeled as the ones who had crossed lines. I still believed his behavior was wrong and deeply unfair. But now the company had decided that we, not he, were the ones with the problem. After that, the atmosphere in the office became even more difficult. Somehow, word spread about the investigation and the outcome. I still do not know who shared the details, but it became obvious that many people knew. People started treating me differently. The looks I got ranged from awkward to judgmental. Some people started avoiding me. Others made polite small talk but kept it short. Some coworkers who used to invite us out stopped including us. It felt like they did not want to risk being tied to whatever trouble they thought we had caused. I saw more and more people going out of their way to be kind to Dan, checking in on him, inviting him to things, almost as if they were publicly choosing sides. My relationships with Megan and Sarah also changed. We had been so united at first, but slowly cracks appeared. Sarah told me she felt like I had pushed her into the complaint. She said she had not been as upset as I was and had gone along with it because she did not want to argue with me. Now that there were consequences, she regretted being involved and quietly blamed me. Megan stayed closer for a while but eventually started saying things like maybe we had misread the situation or maybe we should have just accepted his boundaries. It started to feel like everyone wanted to back away from what we had done, even though we had all agreed at the time. Then I heard that Dan had been given a new position in another department. It was described as a move that would help his career grow. To me, it felt like he was being rewarded. He got a fresh start and a new role, while I was left behind with a warning in my file and a damaged reputation. Soon I noticed that I was the one who was now being left out. People would have conversations that ended when I walked up. They would make lunch plans without mentioning them near me. They were polite when work required it, but there was a distance there that had not been there before. It hit me that I was now feeling something similar to what I had accused him of making us feel. I was the one eating alone more often, the one people seemed cautious around. The difference was that my isolation was the result of something I had actively done, even if I believed my reasons were valid. My work performance began to slip. My mind was always on the situation. I kept replaying the meetings in my head. I worried about what people thought of me. I wondered if any chance of promotion was gone. My supervisor commented that I seemed distracted and less motivated. That added to my anxiety. I still do not fully understand how I became the villain in a situation where I honestly believed I was standing up for fairness. Dan continues to act the same way with female coworkers. He is distant, formal, and only interacts on strictly work matters. Now people see that as him being careful and professional. Meanwhile, I am seen as the person who misread things and made trouble. I feel like a warning story people tell themselves about what happens when you take things too far. Even though deep down I still feel that being treated differently because you are a woman is wrong, I also see that the way I responded has cost me a lot. Maybe I should have tried talking to him directly first. Maybe I should have accepted that some people do not want to be friendly at work, even if it hurts. At the time, it felt too unfair to ignore. I felt like silence meant agreeing that his behavior was fine, so I chose to act. Now I live every day with the result of that choice. I am more cautious. I say less. I watch what I do and what I share. I am still trying to figure out how to move forward in a place where one decision, even one I made with the intention of fixing something, changed the way everyone sees me and possibly changed the entire course of my career.